Hi everybody, I'm Matt Abedi. I am an improviser here in New York City. I have performed at the Magnet Theater for almost 10 years, and the very first video that I produced for YouTube was just a friend that I met at a festival was interested in me explaining. I forgot what it was, but he wanted me to do a video on I think Spokane or something like that. It's one of the other two videos that's on my channel. And I produced that for him. And then I produced another video where I was replying to a comment because someone was like, oh, can you also talk about this other thing? So I'm really new. There's obviously zero production value here. I'm like, is there anything embarrassing in the shot? I guess that I have like a kind of a messy bathroom area. What's it called? A few of you have subscribed, so that's very encouraging. And so I'll keep producing videos. If this sounds like really hokey, like please subscribe, hit the like button. It definitely is encouraging me to try to produce more videos and provide as much help as I possibly can. Okay, so today's topic. We want to talk about the piñata. That was the other question that people had raised on my original video because I mentioned what a piñata is. And if you guys are interested in more formats, please let me know. I mean, maybe I'll do like a video if you guys are interested in like a bunch of different formats I've heard of, or how to build your own format or something like that. And I'll do videos for each one of those. I might even spend a little bit of time today like thinking of like kinds of content I could produce for y'all. Like I said, this is just the third video. Maybe, I might even have some other random video about something else on my personal YouTube channel. But any input, anything y'all want to hear about, like I'm happy to do this just because like to me this is fun. So I'm like very encouraged. I'm like very excited to talk to you guys about improv. All right, cool. So today we're going to talk about the piñata. So I think the best way to think about the piñata is it's a Spokane with really specific types of tags. I have another video about a Spokane where I go like a little bit further into it, but I'll do like a quick overview of what a Spokane is here. Maybe I'll have maybe my explanation will be like a little bit different this time around, and maybe that'll provide a little bit more color or texture to what a Spokane is. So a Spokane is a monoscene at its heart. So in the monoscene, right, like people, we don't ever leave a singular location, and then we have different rules about the monoscene, like people can enter and exit or whatever, but there's no wiping the scene, right? So whatever we're in it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half hour, full hour, whatever your improv show is. The added thing that we provide in a Spokane is you can do a tag run. So what a tag run will look like is someone might tag out, ask them to leave the scene, however you like to do edits. I mean, I'm coming up with video ideas on the spot right now. Maybe I can even do a video about my own ideas around how people should edit, but you tag each person out and you keep one or two or a certain number of people, something to let people know that you are changing the scene, and you explore an idea from the monoscene. So for example, we're having a monoscene and the scene is about like we're all at the dinner table and I'm introducing my parents to my fiance, right? And somewhere along the scene, someone says, "Oh yeah, like I'll never be like a confident person," right? And someone who isn't in the monoscene goes like, "Oh, I think that's like a fun idea," what's it called? They do a tag, and we see a scene where someone goes like, "Oh my God, you've invented the cure to cancer," all right? And that person then does their response, right? Which is like, maybe it'll work. It's like, well, it's eradicated. And it's like, yeah, but like, is it a cure, right? That's like that person demonstrating the behavior that we saw in the mono scene of not being confident, right? And then we can follow that idea of this not confident person in another scene, right? We do another, someone tags everybody out except for this not confident person, and we put them in a new situation, which is like, I don't know, like, hey, do you want to get dressed and go to dinner? And that person's like, can I get myself dressed? I don't know. This is a very spare idea, but they're not meant to be funny as much as like to explain that a Spokane, and it's very bare bones, is a mono scene, and you just allow the parts of the team, the people who are on the team who are not in the scene, to be able to hear an idea that's happening in the mono scene, and then isolate it, and then explore that idea. Okay, so that idea could be lots of different things. We'll talk about that in a minute. It could even be as simple as someone going, oh yeah, like my roommate was, I don't know, I was roommates with Yogi Bear. It's like the cartoon bear, Yogi Bear was your roommate. And what's it called? We can then quickly go see that idea, that specific idea of having Yogi Bear as your roommate. And then maybe the next tag would be like, okay, if Yogi Bear is your roommate, maybe you also rush for fraternity with Yogi Bear. Maybe Yogi Bear like leaves a yogi sock on the door. What does that mean? Right? So we're now following this isolated idea out. And then the way that our Spokane resets itself is as we've explored that idea, right? We have multiple tags out. Someone at some point does do a big wipe on the tag run, and then we return to the mono scene, right? So in this case, we would return to the dinner that I'm having where I'm introducing people to my fiance, or introducing my parents to my fiance, not just random people, but people to my fiance, or my parents to my fiance. One more like really, really bare bones explanation of this, right? Which is like, it sort of looks like this, right? We have a scene that we'll always return to. There's an idea, someone on the back line or on the sides or wherever says, oh, I want to see that idea. They initiate a brand new scene. We see that idea, and then we can continue to explore that idea. We can continue to see variations on that idea out and out and out, right? So we do one scene, another scene that's around this Yogi Bear idea, a third scene that's around this Yogi Bear idea, and then once someone on the team says, all right, I think we've done enough of this Yogi Bear idea, we do a big wipe, and then we return back. So that's where Spokane gets its name, right? Which is like we have a hub, and then we have scenic spokes that go out. All right, great. So now we can talk about a piñata. And what I'll say is that a piñata is a Spokane with rules around the kinds of tags that you can create. And just for this video, I'm going to say that there are 4 specific types of tags. And the temptation for a lot of folks, including myself, is to be like, well, some tags are kind of both, right? And it's like, yeah, yes. These are just guidelines to help you think about or really kind of organize your thoughts whenever you're thinking about tagging. So I'm going to talk about the 4 different tag types, and those tag types I think are true, or 4, I mean, I don't know, it's not a complete list of 4. I'm going to give you 4 tag types. I'm going to explain that, I want to tell you that those tag types exist in all formats, right? So you could do a herald with these tag types, you could do what's it called? You could do a modified JTS Brown, you could do a deconstruction, you could do all sorts of different formats. You could do a club sandwich, you could do a pure narrative with these kinds of tags built into it or whatever, right? I want to talk to you about these tag types just to be able to say, like, you could have a Spokane that is each one of these tag types. A piñata is just a Spokane with a specific type of tag that's used the entire time. Okay. Great. So Spokane is the general, and then today we're learning the specific variation, which is a piñata. And I'll say this. Introducing tag types also changes the format and introduces new considerations that you should have. Because, and you'll see this when we talk about the piñata, the tag type produces a certain texture to the show, and so you have to kind of compensate for that texture. It creates new opportunities, things that you should have your antennas up for. Again, we'll talk about it in a second. So, first one is, I think, the most famous one because UCB is so interested in it, is very adamant about it. And it's the kind that produces sketch writing, which is game. I could do a whole video on game. Everybody could. Game is also a very controversial topic because it's kind of one of those terms that like means everything in a way. But what we'll say, and I think which is a generally accepted understanding of what game is an internal logic that is repeatable. An internal logic that is repeatable. So we don't want to talk about logic in a sense that like you would learn in a philosophy class, which is like all philosophers are human. Socrates is a philosopher, therefore Socrates is a human, right? We're talking about an internal logic, like the way that a human being navigates their life and creates like if-then conditions that just make sense to them, right? For instance, a really easy one is like anyone who has a phobia, right? It's like, I'm afraid of spiders, and so therefore I avoid being around spiders as much as possible, or I run from them, right? That is not logic in the sense that like someone should sit down and be like, well, you know, spiders are mostly like harmless or whatever, but rather the logic of like, because this is true, I have this kind of reaction or this belief, whatever. That's what I'm going to talk about as internal logic. Internal logic could also be the internal logic that you'd normally run into in like a joke, right? Which is like, what's it called? I don't know. I'm trying to think of like I don't know. You're kind of like dad joke about like cheating, right? Which is like everyone hides in the lampshade, right? That logic of like, or I ran into this joke the other day, right? Which is like, hey, you know, you were like, this is a political joke. I will not be political on the YouTube channel, but like, hopefully you can just appreciate the construction of the joke, right? Which is like, Donald Trump goes to hell, right? And Satan goes like, oh, actually, we're kind of overcrowded. So, but you're not gonna, not be in hell. So what you have to do instead is I'm gonna take you to 3 people, and you're gonna take their place, right? And in the very first thing, he sees, I don't know, Dick Cheney or whoever getting spanked 1,000 times, and Donald Trump goes like, no, I don't want that to happen. And the next one, he sees Barack Obama, I don't know, being force-fed books or whatever, and Trump goes like, no, I don't want that to happen. And then in the third one, Bill Clinton is getting blown by Monica Lewinsky over and over and over again. Donald Trump goes like, this I can deal with. And Satan goes, okay, Monica, you can leave, right? That internal logic, the logic is that the whoever's hearing the joke hears the logic of like, you will replace the person here, right? So this is the person being tortured or whatever, right? In that third beat of the joke, we take the joke's internal logic of like, these are major political figures, right? Who are facing their punishment in hell, and our expectation that Trump is going to replace Bill Clinton, right? And we use that pattern, that logic of the joke against you. So this is game, right? So game can be personal, individual character games, but also games can be the logic of the scene, the logic of the joke that we can bend and manipulate however we like. So that is game. And we can explore doing a Spokane with just game moves, which I think is very fun, actually. It produces really wacky Spokane shows, but it also has the danger of turning into like very Family Guy. I'm doing a lot of air quotes today, y'all. I don't know what's going on. But you can do a lot of Family Guy moves, which can feel like cheap jokes. No shade to anybody who loves Family Guy. The next one, we can do narrative, right? Narrative is if this situation is true, what would be the output, or what would be the prequel to this situation, right? So a narrative move usually kind of has like a consequential or therefore component to it, which makes it close to exploration, which we'll talk about, which is important to what a piñata is. Narrative moves are usually not as focused on the character. So, for instance, we do that Yogi Bear scene, right? We do that Yogi Bear move, and a narrative move might be for us to sit down with the admissions office, right, and everyone be like, "Hey, are we really gonna accept Yogi Bear into Duke University or whatever?" That's narrative in the sense that it's like that scene had to have happened, right, in order to produce the idea that Yogi Bear is our roommate. Or later on, like Yogi Bear is our roommate, right? We talked about some of the college things that Yogi Bear would do. Those are like game moves, right? Yogi Bear, well, I don't want to get into the terms too much right now. But we talked about different ways of exploring that Yogi Bear idea. A narrative way of exploring that Yogi Bear idea is like, what's it called? Yogi Bear is brought into the principal's office because he's been stealing everyone's picnic baskets, right? It's Yogi Bear's behavior, and the next step in Yogi Bear being Yogi Bear on a university campus is he's probably stealing people's picnic baskets, which means he would be brought in for like some sort of disciplinary hearing, right? Narrative always feels like the next part in a movie, and has a tendency to create dramatic tension, right? We can talk about narrative a whole bunch, but in this situation, right, the dramatic tension is like, is Yogi Bear going to stay in college, right? It feels like a movie in the sense that like you can see the trailer of like Yogi Bear being Yogi Bear on campus, but then all of a sudden, right, this narrative moment happens where is he going to stay in school? All right, next thing that we'll talk about is character. And I'm talking about all these tag types because they'll kind of give you bumpers as to like, in order to make it a genuine piñata, we have to avoid game moves. So you have to understand what game moves are. In order to make it a genuine piñata, we need to understand the overlap between narrative moves and exploration moves. And there is some overlap, as you just probably caught me cause that problem. And then there's also an overlap between this fourth type of tag, which is like character tags. So character tags, what are character tags? Character tags are more about like, I think theaters that kind of emphasize this a little bit more, like Magnet's very big on this, Annoyance is kind of big on this. What's it called? Groundlings is probably big on this. I've never studied the Groundlings. But character is like, if you ever watched like old Mad TV sketches where it's like Stewart, or, you know, unfortunately the very canceled Miss Swan impression, right, or whatever, right? We have this kind of fully fleshed out character, like Stewart's mom, or like this like Midwestern mom stereotype that like I think Mo Collins played, right? Who's just like an odd person, and they have lots of characteristics about them. So that it can include things like behavioral games, for instance, right? Like Stewart on Mad TV always wants to show off something that he can do, but it's always like, you know, he's just jumping and flailing his arms, right? Look what I can do, right? It's like a little game move of his. But it's also repeated behaviors, the way that he dresses, the way that he talks, what's it called? And a lot of character work, you'll talk about the spine and voice of the character, the mindset of the character, right? Which can unveil new games. Like character-based stuff, I saved kind of as a little bit of the last because it encompasses a whole lot. But the thing that's the through line, if we're tagging through just character, is we open up our possibilities to like finding new games, finding new exploration moves, finding new narrative, all of that, so long as this person, this character is the focal point of it, right? We want to see that character fully through. And character is really important to understand for a piñata because I think a much looser piñata does character, right? Where we can do all of these different tags, but because we're so focused on exploring the character, we will do a little bit of game. We'll do a little exploration. We'll do a little bit of narrative, right? And you caught me doing that with the Yogi Bear thing, right? Which is we could have game moves, which is like, what is Yogi Bear doing college things, right? What's the internal logic of like Yogi Bear? Oh my God. I think this is still okay. Good. I keep forgetting. I'm trying to make sure that this keeps recording, but I keep messing up. Oh well. It'll be a fun move. I'll just make sure I jostle the mouse a little bit more often. Okay, so these are very messy videos. I hope you guys are enjoying them. I don't know. I'll try to get them with like a little bit better, a little bit more production value at some point. Okay. So I guess the huge point there is character moves create a looser. Oh my God. All right, whatever. Character moves create this like much looser piñata, and you can still do a piñata without being a very strict piñata, and have I think a lot more fun so long as you keep the focus on just this character. And if you find games, you play those games, and if the game runs out, right, we don't swipe on the game. We can then do an exploration move, do a narrative move. Like, it gives us a lot of freedom. And I would say you would initiate the tag on this run if you were doing a character style piñata, just whenever you're like, hey, I feel like I just want to know even more about this character, or that like I think this scene has just shifted its focus on this character enough, and that we have enough to get off the ground to be able to do lots of moves. I'll say also for a team that wants to do like a strong character oriented piñata, setting up the mono scene of a character piñata, a big consideration there is like everyone should make like a choice. And you should try to be in the family of the same choices, which is something to navigate, but you should all make like a pretty distinctive choice. And I think one of the big questions of every one of your shows will be like, why is it that all four of these weirdos are together? And that's going to be something we'll talk about at the third part of this talk. We're talking about goals. Okay, so, but what is like the strictest form of a piñata? And that is to use exploration moves only. What are exploration moves, and why is it that this makes it a piñata? Well, exploration moves are not... Okay, exploration moves are around discovering consequence, right, that are not necessarily narrative, right? This is that overlap. So, what's consequence? If Yogi Bear is your roommate, a consequence of that would be that Yogi Bear, I mean, that like, I guess cartoons and humans are side by side, right? That's an exploration move. So we might learn about all of the different cartoon characters that show up on a college campus. Another part of Yogi Bear being on a college campus is that he has Yogi Bear parents, right? Who might have Yogi Bear expectations about what he's going to study at school, right? So they might be really happy that he's in college, or they might disapprove. Well, you should be a yogi lawyer when you grow up. I don't know what that looks like, right? But notice how like exploration kind of like adds like a little bit more of like a scatter shot of like what else would have to be true if this logical thing is true. I think John Oliver the other day was no. I think Raleigh Williams, who has a great channel called Climate Town, by the way. Did this like quick bit about oh no, I just lost it. I just lost it because my dishwasher was beeping at me. Oh no. Oh well. Okay, but the point is that with game moves we have like a very specific logic, and we follow that logic happening over and over and over again, right? So the logic of Yogi Bear stealing picnic baskets, right, could also turn into the logic of like Yogi Bear stealing like exams, right, and what that looks like. Maybe that's exploration move. Maybe this isn't a really great example, but like there, yeah, I won't get like I'll try not to get too like far into this, just because like I'm not like I should have if I was going to talk about game a lot more specifically, I should have just sat down and like came up with some really great game ideas. Exploration comes a whole lot more naturally to me, but the point is, exploration is about finding other places where we might discover game. I think it might be a good way of putting it out there, right? So if Yogi Bear goes on a college campus, he has Yogi parents. If those Yogi parents exist, right, they have Yogi expectations. Those Yogi expectations might be our game moves, right? So Yogi expectations are around like going to school, marrying another Yogi Bear, whatever else. And another exploration move might be to like Yogi Bear has a specific Yogi fraternity that he joins, right? Okay, well, what does an all Yogi Bear fraternity look like? Or if it's not that, right? Like Yogi Bear joins just a regular fraternity, what does that look like? And then we have game moves around what that means. So exploration is always, I would say, like by way of metaphor, like wider, right? We're trying to figure out more of what's true about this character. And game is usually like, we found out this very specific thing about Yogi Bear, and we want to see that idea played out fully, right? We want to see that logic played out. I think another way of like knowing that you're playing game more than you're playing exploration move is usually like game has some component of heightening in it, right? So if we find out that like Yogi Bear steals picnic baskets, Yogi Bear steals exams, Yogi Bear steals the endowment of the university, Yogi Bear cons his way through school or whatever, there is an element of heightening, which is like the thing that he steals goes from like a little bad, more bad, very bad, the worst, right? Like an innocent sort of like he, all the way up to like Yogi Bear is kind of like messed up person, right? That's usually a surefire sign that you're playing game. Exploration moves, right? Finding out that you have Yogi parents, Yogi fraternity, Yogi social club, what's it called? You went to an all Yogi school. Those are exploration moves because each one of them is a different, distinct area of this Yogi Bear goes to college idea that we're exploring. Okay, so these are the different tag types. Exploration moves just take us into different directions. Does that mean, if we go back to the Spokane, right? Does that mean that whenever we're doing the Spokane, that like we did one exploration move to get out of our scene, our mono scene? Then we're going to do another exploration move out of that. We're going to do another exploration move out of that, and so on. I would say dealer's choice. I would say what makes it a really strict piñata is that at least the first move is an exploration move, and every move after that is, I think, to be more strict, either a character move or maybe even a narrative move. And if it's super strict, we're talking about just exploration moves, so we can learn as much about the character as possible in as many different ways as possible, and then return them to the mono scene, seeing this kind of like more wide character who re-enters the mono scene, and the entire audience knows a ton more about them. I would say generally you should avoid game moves if you're trying to do a piñata. A piñata's goal, and that's the third part of this video here that we're going to talk about, the goals of a piñata. The goal of a piñata is to give us a depth and a rich understanding of all of these characters, not to produce jokes for each. It's not to produce like lots of jokes every time we do a tag run, right? This might seem like kind of counterintuitive because you're like, well, improv is about producing jokes and blah blah, but like in a style of improv, which is like more like grounded, right, more theatrical, less joke oriented, less sketch oriented, we're gonna produce laughs at each juncture of exploration. And it also mean that like if the joke doesn't land in any one of our exploration movements, the audience doesn't go like, nah, boo, like the joke messed up. They would full commitment of acting the character, playing out the character. The audience will at least go like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what Yogi Bear would do. So like there's no complaint here. And it gives you space and opportunity to get laughs elsewhere, right? So it produces a more patient play, and I would say that having kind of like an exclusion, like having your mindset outside of game, but more focused on character, narrative, and more specifically exploration, right, will give you a wide understanding of that character. And because that character is fully fleshed out, when they're living in the mono scene that you return to, they'll be believable and they'll have natural jokes that come around the way that you would have of a lot of these character-based comedy people that you run into. I mean, there's a whole like debate right now about like SNL and how SNL used to have a whole lot more character stuff, and that the quality of improv has got, not quality of improv, the quality of the sketches hasn't actually gone down, but that like audiences generally love character-based stuff a whole lot more than sketch, right? Because sketch is like a brand new joke every single time, but it's much more satisfying. And like, I mean, I don't know, sketches from back in the day, at least Mad TV. I really loved Mad TV growing up. It's like, as soon as you saw that character, the whole audience was like, woo, we're seeing Will Sasso play, you know, I think he plays like, I don't know, whatever character he was playing. Like, people would be so excited to see him in his gray wig, right, and speaking in a particular way or whatever else. Even if the sketch didn't do too particularly well, like super well, people were super stoked to see the character. I'm Persian, so I know this is also a canceled character, but growing up, I loved this character so much. It's like Malcolm McDonald, I think, played like depressed Persian tow truck man. I was just like, just seeing the depressed Persian tow truck man was like exciting and fun to me. And I think what we want to do whenever we're doing a piñata is have that character be so rich that the audience is so excited to see this very rich, very fleshed out character return to the mono scene and perform. Or if you're really nailing it, while you're going out in your spoke, that with each new successive exploration, people are like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what this character is like at the DMV. I can't wait to see this character and what they're like at the blank, right? I think people have this with like Borat, for instance, right? Which is like, again, oh man, some of these characters are canceled. Whatever, I loved Borat. But like, it was exciting to see like Borat learns etiquette. Borat learns, Borat goes speed dating. Borat does this, right? That's because we've explored that character in a lot of ways. And there are also really great character games and whatever that's built in. But the character is very rich that us as an audience are excited to see that character in lots of different places. Game is a little bit different in the sense that game is more about like people want to see that specific joke. And how that joke plays out. It's very thinky. It's very, very different. But this is a piñata. We'll talk about game, and I'll have like real game examples, if you guys want me to talk about game. Okay, goals. Goals of a piñata. Well, let's talk about. Oh my God, my dishwasher's going crazy. Goals of a piñata. In my previous video about a Spokane, it was like the goal of the Spokane is to make the mono scene so eventful that returning to it is a very comfortable thing to do. And I think that's generally true here also. But one of the nice things about a piñata is that if you return to the monoscene and the monoscene is not going so well, usually the strength of each individual character and each time you learn about a new character makes the monoscene more interesting. Why? This goes back to what I said at the very top, which is like, people should make a pretty strong choice about their character up top, right? Their posture, how they speak, whatever. Matching here should be like approximate. The reason is because as we learn more about these strange people, the monoscene will become more interesting because the audience's question is, why is it that these four oddballs are all on a road trip together, sitting on the same couch, right? Like, the monoscene doesn't need as much richness in it because the characters will, and it will produce big questions that need to be answered in the monoscene. So my advice in that earlier video about the monoscene in a Spokane need to sustain itself is kind of solved by this tag choice, because we don't need to what's it called? I would say generally in a Spokane, we need to explain to the audience pretty early why they're seeing the monoscene at all, right? It's because we're breaking bad news to someone, it's because someone's getting married, it's because, something pretty eventful happened that is driving these characters together. The opposite ends up being true. If we're all sitting on the same couch, we find out each person's kind of an oddball, the monoscene then becomes answering this really other big question, which is in itself really sustaining. And naturally, I notice you don't even have to coach players to do it. When you're in there, there is like this human quality of like if you've ever seen Saturday Night Live has this like character bit that they do, which is like that couple that you don't know how that they're together or something like that, and it's like one guy who's like yelling and has a lot of like chiefy energy to him, and then another and his girlfriend is like this bookish woman who like says like 3 words edgewise, right? Naturally as an audience we're like, how does this work? And every time they do that character bit, they give you a little explanation, which is fun. That's what we're going to end up having in a piñata, right? That's kind of where the name comes from, right? Is every time we're going out on a spoke, we're stuffing more candy into the monoscene, right? Every time we do a new exploration move and we learn even more about this character, we're stuffing more candy into the monoscene. And at some point, right, all of this weirdness of these 4 or 5 people, however many people are in the source scene of your piñata, kind of explodes, right? Because we have to understand what their connections with their weirdness is, how they deal and manage with each other. So you have a lot more freedom around what the goal of the monoscene is and the goal of a piñata is. So one goal that you can have, and we'll talk about goals of the monoscene and then we'll talk about format goals. So goals of the monoscene, one could be palate cleanser, right? So just treat the monoscene almost like a group game every single time, except for, of course, when you're first setting up the show, and then anytime you're ready to transition, right? So that might be, right, like, yeah, well, that would require me to talk about group games and different kinds of group games, but we would just re-enter the scene, initiate some kind of group game, and at some point someone would just get the focus, and we would learn enough about that character to start a new spoke. Another goal is to treat the piñata source scene as a couch opener. Couch opener is one of many openers, which I think a couch opener is very dangerous if it's not done properly or doesn't have sort of like safety net in place. Couch opener is usually like, the suggestion is we get a topic from the audience and all the players sit down on a couch, right? And they'll discuss the topic, their opinion or their hot take on the topic. Here, our goal is just to land on an idea, usually like a point of view, and move out, right? So we just treat the source scene like an opener, and every time we return, we do everything we can to do our couch opening or something similar, right? And that can really easily be done by like every time we swipe back, right? Someone just mentions a related topic or some sort of like theme that they saw, right? So if we were doing all these Yogi Bear goes to college exploration moves, someone sweeps back and just goes like, personally, like, I never felt any pressure from my parents. And I think, pressure from parents is like generally not a good thing, right? Everyone gives their hot take. And at some point, one person says something and we all go, wait, I want to dig into who you are that you believe such and such about. Like maybe one person just goes like, oh, no, I do everything my parents tell me, right? And now everyone goes like, wait, so what kind of person are you? When we're going to explore that character, right? This is really great because it naturally produces certain kinds of divisions and differences between the characters, right? People are going to have to disagree and whatever else. And that means that the candy that we're stuffing into our mono scene, into the hub of our Spokane, has even more explosive potential. That said, we can also do a piñata where the core scene is a mono scene. And I would say this is the best way of going about it, is we do a scene and we make sure that that scene is like rich and interesting and there's a reason to go to that scene and all that stuff. I already have a video on a mono scene or a video on a Spokane where I talk about this, but a piñata isn't such a hefty format that you can't do a chunky mono scene. I would just say if you're a team that's like faster and you like bailing on ideas and you like moving pretty quickly, you can absolutely do a piñata as a way of making sure that your shows are still rich and you're not falling into a game trap, and also not having to sit in a plodding mono scene, with a lot of concern all over everybody's faces. That said, what is the goal of the format broadly? What makes a piñata like what makes a piñata successful? I would say a successful piñata is we have 3 to 5 characters in the mono scene, and we learn about each or as many of the characters as possible. So that means each character gets a big exploration of who they are. And sometimes that means that we have multiple spokes for some folks, because maybe this person has 2 short spokes and this person has 1 really long spoke and this one has like 3 short spokes. That's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is to answer the key question, why, oh my God, I gotta shut this thing off with the like automated, I can't make the balloons happen again. I guess this is like the thumbs up. There we go. Why are these people together? I've talked about this already, but you should be able to step away from your show and be able to answer that question pretty easily. They all grew up together. They're all siblings. They're just an odd couple. Like, whatever it is, you should have some answer to that question, and that answer is usually a little satisfying and fun. It should be inventive. What do I mean by that? I think a hallmark of like improv, of really great improv, is like you should get away from a show and just be like, how did anyone think of that? Right? It's like it feels so not baked. And I think that why are these people together? If that answer is very satisfying, where like we just had to like come up with that idea on its spot, usually is a sign that you did a good job of exploring all these characters. They were odd and various enough, and everyone has had a lot of input into what each one of these characters is about, right? Because if we're tagging out, that means that one of your teammates is telling you an idea about your character and you're integrating that idea. So we have a really satisfying, really interesting reason as to why these people are all together. I would say The third big goal, and that'll be basically it. The third very big goal of Piñata is to hint at and produce games that you can play in the mono scene without burning them out. I save this for last because it's very like abstract idea. But remember how you said that like whenever you have exploration moves, you'll land on something that is a game. Remember, exploration moves tells us like all of the things that must also be true, right? And then game is we pick one of the things that is true and we just figure out like if that logic is true, let's put that logic in more places, right? And usually one of the symptoms that we're playing game, or one of the symptoms I should just say of that we're playing game is we have heightening as a component of game, right? Which is every variable is the same to the joke except for this one piece is like tweaked and switched, and that's usually where we produce the joke. So because we're doing these tags, and hopefully we're doing a lot of exploration moves, and if we're doing a slightly looser one, we're doing some character and narrative moves also. But that means that we will learn things like maybe Yogi Bear, in a scene where we explore his parents, his Yogi parents. We find out that he's very studious and really he's like, my parents are the best. I'll do anything my parents tell me, right? Whenever we're in the mono scene, right, maybe we find out that like he's at the dinner table. He's at the dinner table with his parents, right? What's it called? I don't know. The parents are just like, well, do you think we should have dessert? And he goes, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then both of the parents go like, I don't know, you're really putting on some pounds or whatever. It sounds super rude. But he immediately capitulates, right? He immediately goes like, yeah, mom, dad, you're right. I shouldn't. I'll say this really quickly. That might not be an immediately funny joke. It's not. There might be funnier ways of running into that. But notice that like if that happened and there are no laughs, the audience isn't like, oh, they tried a joke and failed. They would just see like a character who did their character thing correctly. That is also an example of a game move of the logic of like, I do anything my parents tell me, right, inside the mono scene. So that's the hallmark of a really great piñata is we didn't have game in the spokes, but our character's so rich, they have games that they can play in the mono scene, and we can see that all the things that we explored about them come true again whenever we return to the mono scene. Okay. I hope that was helpful as to what a piñata is. Piñata is one of my favorite formats. Spokane is one of my favorite formats. What's it called? I like doing these videos. I'm like, yeah, this video is already an hour. Oh my God. I obviously like talking about this stuff. So if you want to hear videos about different formats, if you want to hear about warm-ups, if you have a specific improv skill that you're working on, or you want to learn about essential skills, like anything that comes to mind about improv, like I'll produce a video about it, and I'll try to get better about like the production of all of this stuff. But yeah, that's me. Hit the sub button, smash the like button, leave a comment, share this with people. That's what YouTube people say. Okay.